Pay close attention to this video. A woman is in a classroom and she appears to be uncomfortable. She then lifts her dress and shows that on her leg it says help. The teacher then sees that, but doesn't seem to have understood what it was about. She then pulls down her dress and then a man starts telling her that she shouldn't take so long to sit down. The teacher then starts the class by saying that that day they will have a test and then says that he will give them the tests. He then asks everyone to put their cell phones on top of his desk and then starts handing out the tests to the students. When he finishes handing out the tests, the students go to the teacher's desk and place their cell phones on it. They then start to take the test, and at that moment, the man tells his teacher that he doesn't want to stay in that place anymore. He says he would change and the teacher says it would be fine. He then gets up and tells another student to get out of his seat as he wants to sit there. The other student agrees with that and obeys him. The woman then starts to get anxious about it and she writes a request for help on a piece of paper. She writes a request for help on a piece of paper and says the man had a gun. Meanwhile, the other students continue to take their exams. She then takes the paper she had written the plea for help on and then crumples it up. She picks up the crumpled paper and throws it near the professor. The teacher then picks up the paper from the floor and almost reads what was written, but at that moment, a student calls out to him. The student asks the teacher to go to his desk and then the teacher goes to him. The student then tells the teacher that he was not understanding that question. The teacher then tells the student that he couldn't give him the answer, that he should have studied more. At that moment, the man asks the woman to give him the test answers, because she would regret it if she didn't do that. The teacher then tells all the students that they could not ask anything about the test, because everything that was on the test he had taught in the classroom. He goes on to say that that subject, he had accomplished a lot with his students and that they shouldn't have any doubts about it, for they should already have known what the answer to each question was. He says that he had taught all that to his students and that he couldn't help them anymore, because that was the last test and that if they didn't pass it, they would repeat that subject. He then starts walking around the room and says that he didn't want any of them to repeat that class, because he liked all of them. When the professor walks past the woman, she drops her pen and asks him if he could get it for her. The teacher then tells her to be more careful with her stuff and then bends down to pick up the pen from the floor. At this point, the teacher sees that the man was acting very suspiciously and so he hands the woman the pen telling her to be more careful. The woman, then, is very uncomfortable with that situation and at that moment, the teacher says that he needed to go out for a while to drink a glass of water and that he would come back to the room soon. He asks the police for help saying he had an urgent situation at his school. He says he had a student with a gun inside the school who needed help. At that moment, he returns to the room and says that now he had finished what he had to do. He then goes to the woman and ends up spilling water on her. He apologizes to her, but the man gets up and says he couldn't do that kind of thing to the girl. The teacher then apologizes to him, saying that he would go get another test for the woman, as he had wet the one she was doing. The man then says that he should be more careful with the things he was doing and says that he had wet all over the woman's test. He then says that his teacher must have been drunk to do something like that. The teacher then apologizes to them and says that he would bring the woman another test soon. She then tells her teacher that she didn't have a problem and that she would be waiting for him. The teacher then hands the test to the girl and tells her not to worry, as he had already written the answers she had written on the test that he had wet. He then apologizes to her and goes to her table. At that moment, the man asks her again for the test answers and he says she was taking too long. The woman then sees the note that the professor had left for her and that makes her feel more relieved. The man then keeps asking the woman to give him the test answers and says that she was taking too long to do that. She then tears off a piece of her evidence and hands it to the man. At this point, the teacher realizes what they were doing, but doesn't say anything. The teacher then says that the time for them to take the test was already ending and so he would collect the tests of his students. He then says that they could get their test results the following week and that he wishes they did well. The teacher then goes to the man's desk to get the test from him, but the man says he's not finished yet. The man says that when he had finished his test, he would take it to his teacher. The man then asks the woman to tell him what the answer to the last question was, because he still didn't know. She then says that she had already turned in her test to the teacher and that she didn't remember what the answer was. The teacher then says that those who had already finished their test could leave now. He reminds his students that the following week they will be able to find out what their result was on that test. The woman starts to get up to leave, but the man says she's not going anywhere and tells her to sit down. The teacher then says that those who hadn't finished yet should hurry up, because time was running out. At this point, the man says he was done and then tells the woman to follow him. The teacher then gets up and says he didn't care if they finished the test or not, and then he rips the man's test. This makes the man furious, and he says the professor couldn't do that with his test. The teacher then says that he could do whatever he wanted, as he knew the man was getting the woman's answers. He said he had seen them do it. He says that, because of that, they would not graduate from that school. The man then says that the teacher didn't understand who he was talking to and says that if he wanted to, the teacher could be fired from the school. The teacher then says that he should do that and that he should also show his father the paper he was using to receive the girl's answers. He then says that it wasn't his. The woman then says that it was not the man's fault, because she was the one who had given the answers to him. The professor then tells her not to do that, because she was one of the best students at that college, and he asks her not to try to defend the man. The woman then tells her teacher that she was telling the truth and asks him to believe her. He then says that he was leaving along with the woman, but the professor says that she wasn't going anywhere. The man is furious with that and goes to them saying that he would take the woman with him. They then start to fight, and at that moment, the teacher falls to the ground. At that moment, a policeman arrives at the school and he hears the noise. He says that weird noise, and it sounded like a gunshot. He then enters the classroom and tells the man not to move. The man then takes the woman hostage and shoots her, the officer not doing anything or he would shoot her. At that moment, the teacher, who was lying on the ground, gets up and makes the man fall to the ground. The policeman takes advantage of that situation and arrests the man. At that moment, the teacher starts to get up and then the woman goes to him and asks if he was okay. She then helps the teacher to his feet and helps him to sit in the chair. The professor then says that he hoped that, however what had happened, the man would never leave prison again. The woman then apologizes to the professor, saying that she would tell him what had happened. So, it showed us that some time ago the professor passed near the man. Afterwards, the woman ends up passing close to the man too, and then the man tells her to wait a bit. She asks what he wanted and he says he needed her help. She then asks what the man wanted from her, and the man then says that he needed her help with the test answers and said she needed all the test answers, but the woman says she couldn't do that as she might lose her college place. The man then says that he didn't care about that as he needed the answers. He then says that she would help him and shows that he had a gun. The woman then apologizes to the man and says that she would do as he asked. Later, the woman arrives in the classroom and then asks her teacher if she could go to the bathroom. The teacher says that would be fine, and then the man tells her not to do anything wrong. The teacher then asks her to leave her cell phone on the table, and then she said she would be coming back to the room soon. She then goes to the bathroom and starts thinking about what she could do. She said that she couldn't end her dreams that way, but that there was no way out of that situation. She then has an idea and writes help on her leg. She then apologizes to the teacher. She says that the teacher had tried to help her, but that he had gotten out of that situation very badly.